Hello. Okay, cool. So I'm going to get started. My name's Lynd, and today we're going to be talking about microcontrollers. So just curious, how many of you have used microcontrollers in your project? Okay, I figured so much. Yeah, so microcontrollers have been the heart of most of the projects that I've been working on over the past couple of years for a lot of really great reasons. For one, I have a proclivity to break things, and where is this? Give me a second for this to load. Raspberry Pis get pretty damn expensive, which you'll see in a second. I have a graveyard of broken electronics and a bunch of dismembered Raspberry Pis that I like to call experiments that kind of stand testament to some of the horrible things I'm capable of. But today's focus is some wireless hacking rigs that I've built around microcontrollers. And a couple of the key things that I'm going to be focusing on are why I choose to use microcontrollers for these low-cost applications. And then I'll also extrapolate a little bit and talk about why this is good from an education perspective, especially for students that are wanting to break into the cybersecurity space and might not have access to more expensive tools like Raspberry Pis, especially if you're like me and have destructive proclivities. So for a short background on myself, my name is Lynd. I do a lot of things. I own a business called Lynd Labs. I do cybersecurity consulting. I basically break into people's shit and also fix people's shit, mostly wireless related. And when I'm not doing that, I'm a cybersecurity content creator. Some of you might have seen me on channels like Hack5. My domain is mostly wireless hacking. What kind of got me into this space was growing up, I did not have access to a lot of resources and also technology. So, like for example, just to submit school assignments, my mom would have to run me to Starbucks every day because we didn't have internet. I didn't have my first computer until high school. So finding ways to hack into things and break things at a low cost was of interest to me, and that kind of got me into wireless hacking. One of the first things that I learned how to do was hack Wi-Fi, just so I could do schoolwork. And then I went down this whole rabbit hole of hardware and built a lot of cool stuff. So when I'm not hacking wireless products, I also design things. So these are circuit board earrings that I've been working on but haven't been quite able to assemble for some time because a bunch of other projects have gotten in the way. And I also make cat-themed electronics to teach cybersecurity to beginners. So if you want to learn about that, you can find me after this presentation, or perhaps I'll find time to talk about that during this presentation. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I kind of got my start in hacking out of a place of kind of necessity. What first got me into hardware, actually, was back in middle school, we had issued calculators. We had TI-84s. And when I discovered that you could actually program on these things, because I didn't have a computer, I taught myself how to build games. And how can I put this? I also distributed programs to classmates to facilitate test taking, if you know what I mean. So that's kind of what got me intrigued with hardware and programming. And eventually, yeah, I got into wireless hacking because I needed internet. And I started building rigs with Raspberry Pis. This got pretty expensive pretty quickly. But one of the things that I discovered when I was going down this rabbit hole of wireless hacking was something called war driving. Are any of you familiar with war driving? Cool. It's basically like geocaching, but for Wi-Fi networks. So the idea is, as a hacker, you can drive around a neighborhood block, or you can drive past a strip mall or something like that. In just a couple seconds, you can even do this with your phone, but typically I'll use like a laptop with a Wi-Fi dongle and GPS. You can see precisely where networks are located, kind of like Google Maps, but for networks. You can see what assets are attached to these networks. So you can see, for example, oh, my neighbor has an iPhone, or like these various IoT devices. And you can also determine how vulnerable these are. So just with a couple seconds of driving past networks, this is a really useful way to gather intelligence on them and be able to put it on a map. So this really captivated my interest. I built a lot of war driving rigs. I also started making YouTube videos back in like 8th grade. I made a war skating rig that I mounted to my skateboard and surveilled the local Boeing that was behind my neighborhood, cracked a bunch of Wi-Fi networks in the area. And this was a rig that I built and affixed to my bike. But anyways, why microcontrollers? So since most of you have worked with microcontrollers before, I'm sure you're familiar with kind of the benefit that they offer over using a Raspberry Pi, for instance. There's certain applications where you don't need a full-fledged Linux operating system. Sorry. And microcontrollers are great for set it and forget it kind of applications. I mean, typically, like, you'll see them used in IoT products or for functions where they're designed to perform basically one task and one task well. It's a lot less silicon, which means it's a lot lower of a cost. It's designed to perform one thing. And when it comes to the hacking rigs that I'm going to show you guys, oftentimes I don't need a full operating system. I don't need all the capabilities because I'm performing early stage reconnaissance. If I'm designing a device that's just designed to sniff Wi-Fi networks or to map Wi-Fi networks or things like that, I can do this at an extremely low cost. And thanks to manufacturers like Espressif or even Nordic, who's here, with the research and development that they're doing around like the amount of stuff you can physically cram into such a small silicon die, we're getting like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capabilities and radio for a price point of like $2 to $3. That's how much I'm able to source the chips that I use in my rigs. So also touching on the note of education, part of what I do with the content creation is I try to demystify hacking for beginners and other people that want to get into this space. Because when I was first learning about this, there weren't a lot of really great resources. So being able to perform the attacks that when I was learning, I had to do on a Raspberry Pi or like a full-fledged system for $2 to $3, like that's really phenomenal, especially like if you break one of these devices, you don't have to worry about replacing a full system. And I'm sure you guys know that nowadays Raspberry Pis are upwards of like, I don't know, after the chip shortage, $100 or something crazy like that. Yeah, so these are some of the key reasons why I choose to use microcontrollers. For one, the cost barrier. If I'm building a rig that needs to be replicated multiple times, or if I'm designing a product that's meant to just be thrown somewhere and disposed of, cost is something that I have to think about. And also for students that are wanting to follow along with my projects as well, cost is definitely something to keep in mind. And we'll touch on a couple of these other points as I show you guys some of the rigs that I've built throughout this presentation. So as I mentioned, Espressif is pretty much the heart of most of my projects. Are you guys familiar with these chipsets, or have any of you used them before? Yeah, so it's really awesome what these things are capable of. Depending on where you source them, you can find these chips for like $3 or less. The ESP8266 is a very ubiquitous Wi-Fi chip that you can source now for like $1 to $2. You can perform Wi-Fi attacks. You can do reconnaissance. You can do all sorts of really crazy stuff. On some of the newer models, like the ESP32s, you can even do full packet capture, so you can capture Wi-Fi handshakes and crack them. They even have a full native USB stack, which allows you to perform attacks against computers and emulate keyboards and do all sorts of really fun stuff. So it's really phenomenal what's available nowadays at such a low price point. And now I'm going to show you guys some of the stuff that I've built. So this was one of the very first, or actually the first, embedded project that I made. So I called it ESP-Bug. I think I built this maybe my freshman year of high school. And this was my first introduction to microcontrollers at all. So my idea was I wanted to build something discrete that I could use to determine when my parents were home or when neighbors were home or things like that. So I built one of these things. I put it in my garage so I can see when my mom was coming home and stop screwing around. And I also put one in my dad's law office so I could see when he was around. I basically took a USB wall charger. I shoved a like $1.50 version of the ESP8266 in there. It's called the ESP01. And I programmed it to perform reconnaissance. What it was looking for specifically is the unique hardware address of a phone or a laptop. It's called a MAC address. And it would look for something called a probe request specifically. So you might have noticed that your phone automatically joins networks that you've joined in the past. The way this works is it is constantly shouting out a list of networks called a preferred network list. So it'll be like Starbucks Wi-Fi or home Wi-Fi or things like that. So I essentially built a presence detector that looks for these probe requests and sees if they're coming from a known hardware address, that being my parents' phone or some other known source, and it alerts me through this web interface. So what's really awesome about this is the ESP8266 is capable of hosting, like, you can run a web server on it. So I was able to serve this HTML web page that gives me an overview of nearby Wi-Fi devices. I'm even able to log them or kick them off networks or do all sorts of really fun stuff. It took me about 2 weeks to build this project, and the total build cost was a USB wall charger I found in my garage and a $1.50 microcontroller I got on AliExpress. I'm also making some improvements to the project using Twilio, which is an API that sends you text messages. So I want to use that to get remote updates. If you guys want to find that project, you can check it out on my GitHub. So this was a more recent project that I made around the ESP32. It's a kind of a newer iteration from Espressif. I built this one on a whim. I was visiting my girlfriend, and I noticed her apartment complex has these Wi-Fi cameras. And I was like, I wonder if I can hack into that shit. So I had a microcontroller on me, I had an SD card in my backpack, and I found a vape on the side of the road. So I ripped the battery out of that, and I stuck it into this little box. There's this really cool project, which allows you to perform full Wi-Fi packet capture on these chips. So again, you can source this microcontroller for around $3. So I don't know what the total build cost of this is, at most, like maybe 15 bucks. I don't know what a vape pen runs you, but I found mine for free, I guess. I wasn't able to crack the password yet, but I was able to capture the 4-way handshake. But yeah, typically to do something like this, you need a Wi-Fi dongle that you would typically get for maybe like, I don't know, $15 to $30 on Amazon, a computer, the AirCrack suite. And there's a bunch of other things that kind of get in the way of being able to do this simply. But with the projects that I make, I try to make them easy to replicate and available at a low cost. So when I put out tutorials on how to do this, there's a lot less of a barrier for people that just want to learn about this kind of thing. What is this one? The waiting game. It's on the Teardown network. Yeah. Right? I should have downloaded them, but I forgot my charger here last night, so I wasn't able to like edit my slides or anything, and I don't know. What the hell? Okay. IoT products kind of suck ass. That's what this slide is about. So, Espressif, as I mentioned, these are very ubiquitous chipsets, both for developers, but also I find these a lot of times in production for the exact same reason. It's pretty obvious why you shouldn't put a microprocessor in a product like a smart light bulb or something like that when it comes to like cost and also capabilities. So oftentimes manufacturers will just use off-the-shelf microcontrollers, the same ones that we use in our projects. The ESP8266 is one that I see a lot, oftentimes used in IoT products or smart light bulbs or that kind of thing. So the firmware that I've developed for my projects that I use for reconnaissance and hacking, and even for some of my clients, you can find these in off-the-shelf products. There's a lot of documentation on how you can buy light bulbs like these and reprogram them. So if you wanted to start your own mass surveillance program in your neighborhood, all that requires is buying, I don't know, 20 of these things on Amazon, reprogramming them, and if you dress them up nicely or package them nicely enough and deliver them to all your neighbors, you can probably, I don't know, like trilaterate cars that are driving through your neighborhood, or you can do all sorts of nefarious things. So an example of that, which YouTube admins weren't really quite fond of, I did this demonstration called warshipping. The idea was, it's a play on war driving, it's called warshipping. I built a rig around the ESP8266 that I shoved inside of a box, like a standard mailer. The idea is you can mail this to a corporation, it'll sit in their mailroom and gather reconnaissance. If you address it to a fake employee, it's likely going to get returned back to you. It's a little bit of a stretch, but that was like the scenario that we did. Again, the total build cost was like around $10. YouTube was not happy about the fact that I mailed a lithium polymer battery. If you guys are doing like crowd supply campaigns or if you fulfill products that have LiPo batteries, I'm sure you've heard of UN 3481, I think that's the regulation. Yeah, so that video got taken down almost immediately. But the focus here was basically, it wasn't a perfect demonstration, but kind of the point of this showcase was that if I'm able to perform these attacks, like a man-in-the-middle attack, while this is sitting inside of a mailroom, if I'm able to gather the reconnaissance that I demonstrated for $10, just think about what you can do with a more sophisticated system. Oh yeah, one of the cool things that I built into this project, I forgot. I sourced like a cheap GPS. I think it was like a Neo 6M or something like that. You can find them for maybe $3 to $4. I set up Wi-Fi geofencing on this, so it can determine when the package actually made it to its location and wake the chip up out of deep sleep mode, so that way it's not drawing too much battery while the device is in transit, just using GPS to determine if it was on premise. And if you're wondering if this is a legit attack, like attack vector, there's some cybercrime syndicates that have done similar things, not really in the way of like shipping wireless reconnaissance devices directly to corporations. But this kind of attack works. I forget the exact group, but they bought like these USB sticks that are based around $3 microcontrollers. They programmed them to run keystroke injection attacks, and they mailed it with a fake Amazon gift card to like a bunch of companies. They actually plugged it into their computers and it like screwed up their stuff. I don't remember the exact name of that attack, but these kinds of mailing like social engineering attacks do actually work. This is one of my favorite rigs that I built. It's basically the exact same form factor and stack that I showed in the last slide. It's an ESP8266. It's a cheap GPS and also a LiPo battery. I also built this one kind of on a whim. My friend was like, I have a drone. I wonder if we can determine the precise location of our friends in the park. So we set up like 3 people around the perimeter of a park. I didn't have enough stuff to actually like assemble this, so I like ripped apart a USB cable with my teeth and we stripped it and like wrapped the wires around some components that I happen to have in my backpack. And I made this video that you guys can check out on Hack5 if you want to see about how all of that works. Oh, shoot. So on the topic of war driving, this is another one of my favorite demonstrations that I built. So one of the things that I try to do with my projects is like showcase a practical application for how you can actually use some of these skills like Wi-Fi reconnaissance and war driving. The average person isn't really going to find that interesting or applicable to them. So this is an example of one of the projects that I built to showcase why war driving might be useful. And in this case, it was to detect stalkers. So again, to recap what war driving is, it's a combination of Wi-Fi sniffing and GPS tracking. So it's typically used by hackers to surveil networks, but I was thinking, what if you could use this for a defensive application? So my friend followed me around in his car while I was on a skateboard. You guys can check this video out at creepdetector.wtf. And I had a war driving rig on me, and I wanted to see if I would be able to detect the presence of his phone's unique address while he was following me around. So that worked. The total build cost for this device was, again, around like $5. And the thing about hacking is it's kind of like a double-edged sword. A lot of people will look at the projects that I make and they're like, this is nefarious. Why would you teach this kind of thing? But if you want to learn how you can defend against attacks, you also sort of have to understand how threat actors are using this for malicious purposes. So sometimes I'll also do demonstrations like this where I try to showcase it more from a defensive perspective to get people intrigued. So this is the last project that I have for you guys. So this is another war driving project. This is one of my more recent ones. It's called DNS Drive-By. So I saw something online. It was a statistic maybe from Kaspersky or some other source that said, I think 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 Wi-Fi networks is completely open. So that means if you're driving through a dense enough city space or area, 25% of the time you're going to encounter an open Wi-Fi network. Maybe it's Starbucks or a hotel lobby or something like that. So I was like, what if I was able to use those networks to send out a ping and basically make a tracking device that relies only on Wi-Fi? So using just a Wi-Fi chip and a LiPo battery and a GPS, what I did was I stuck this to my friend's car, and he drove around LA. Every time it encountered an open Wi-Fi network, it would connect ephemerally, just for like 1 to 2 seconds. It would take the GPS location, cram it inside of a DNS request. Do you guys know how DNS works, or have you heard of DNS? Okay, so the way you can think of this, DNS resolves like domains like google.com into an IP address, like numbers that your computer reads. And if you visit like an arbitrary subdomain, say like google.com, you can append whatever you want to the front of that, like docs.google.com, sheets.google.com, right? It'll all resolve to the same IP address. So I found out that you can send the GPS location as a DNS request by appending it to the front of a domain that you own. So my domain is alexlynd.com. What I did was I packed the GPS information as a subdomain, so like GPS location.alexlynd.com. And if you hit a Wi-Fi network like Starbucks or some other open network that has a captive portal page that typically blocks you from connecting, DNS requests will still be able to go through because it's a fundamental service that resolves domain names into IP addresses. Why would you block that? So every time this hits an open Wi-Fi network, it sends a request for alexlynd.com. I don't need to receive any information, or like this device doesn't need to receive any information back. It just needs to be able to send that request out with the GPS location, right? So I append that location to the domain. It shoots it out when it hits an open Wi-Fi network. And we were able to successfully track him over the course of his day as he was driving through Los Angeles. I think this video hasn't been taken down yet. I'm honestly not sure. I kind of lost track. But if you want to search up dnsdriveby.com, you guys can check out that project. I built some pretty cool stuff for this. This is kind of the furthest deep dive that I took with hardware. I really built this thing out. I built like a low power system that triggers it to turn on, or to wake it up out of deep sleep when it determines that the car is actually started up using a vibration sensor and this little circuit that I made here that triggers the ESP8266 to wake up. And there also wasn't physically like enough memory on board to cache or store the GPS location to wait until it hits another open Wi-Fi network. So I designed this like kind of complicated circular queue kind of thing that you can read more about if you're a software nerd. Okay, so I also thought that I had 30 minutes allocated to this talk, but it turns out I have an hour. So I'm just going to wrap up with some closing thoughts and kind of open the floor up to questions. I can also opine about my projects for hours, so if you guys want to hear more about any of them, you guys can feel free to ask me questions. So in terms of where I want to take some of these projects in the future, a lot of the things that I've been doing have kind of been like, how do I put this? Yes. Yes, let me give you the mic.
Are you participating in the DEF CON Worldwide War Driving Day next month?
I wish I could, and I have a lot of nerd friends that are. But I have, I think, 2 presentations to give over the next month and like a bunch of other things, so unfortunately I don't think I will be. But are you? You're too scared. Oh my gosh. I wanted to try to do a war driving workshop here, but I'm actually doing, are you guys familiar with HOPE, Hackers on Planet Earth conference? Okay, that's one that I'm doing next month, but with the cat-themed console that I was telling you guys at the beginning of my presentation, I'm actually doing a war driving workshop with this. So kind of one of my goals with this platform that I've built, it's called DevKitty, is to make cybersecurity fun for beginners and make it more accessible and cute and kind of gamify hacking. So I'm building a war driving app for this that I'm going to be demonstrating. And kind of the premise of the game that I'm building, it's like you can join a cat clan with your friends. The idea is like you can be orange cats or like calico cats, and you guys drive around, and you hack stuff, and you gather points, and it's pretty fun. I might try to do that next year at Teardown. I'm also running this as a crowd supply campaign at some point, so y'all can keep your eyes peeled for that. Does anyone have any other questions or interests? Okay, cool.
I was just curious if you looked into whether you got better accuracy by adding a GPS to that thing than you would have gotten by just looking up the MAC addresses of the APs you connected to. Like with RSSI and a set of APs, you can get really good location well, and would let you take a part off. Well, like, no, because you can call, like, what is it, Skyhook? There's like all these APIs where people have databases they've already mapped out where they are, so you could just skip the GPS and use that information.
I thought about that, and I might do that for the next iteration. But no, I haven't done it quite yet. Nordic was actually telling me about that. They use like some sort of similar technology with open source databases for doing precise location with Wi-Fi networks. That would also reduce the cost too. I wouldn't have to have the GPS module. And you had a question.
You said the open networks like Starbucks allow DNS packets to get through. Do they allow ping packets to get through? Or any other kind of control message?
That I haven't looked into, but I don't think that would necessarily be useful for my application. A ping to my IP address? But then I wouldn't be able to see the location if it was just a ping to the IP. Oh, I guess technically ping does the DNS request itself. Right. But I don't even need to resolve. Well, that's what the DNS request does. Yeah. Not really, no. I don't know about it at a protocol level, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think ping is like IP.
Ping as a protocol does have an arbitrary data. Ping has an arbitrary data segment that you could put your GPS coordinates into. A lot of university networks don't block ping, so you can make make VPNs over ping and communicate between devices. So that could be something if you can't use DNS.
That's awesome. I did not know that. I'm using curl at the moment for that. I suppose so, but I haven't tried that quite yet. It's a Socratic seminar at this point.
DNS has the advantage is that they have to respond to DNS requests because your client will cache the results, so they can't lie about the IP address to put the captive portal. They can, not serve you the page. Well, but then they break the address for you, and they don't, and that annoys people. Bad customer experience. Okay. Mostly they don't, though.
The point is whether they allow DNS requests or not. He said he discovered that.
Yes. Another question.
What other cat-themed things do you have planned?
Oh, I was supposed to give these out, but I forgot to make them. I made, oh crap, I might have left them at my hotel. I made cat-shaped earrings that I was going to give out, and also keychains, which I completely forgot about until now. I'm mostly working on building out an ecosystem for this to make it easier to work with hardware. I kind of like how Adafruit and SparkFun is doing things with like their modular quick connect system and like that type of thing. So my idea is to have basically the entire interface like live on this console. So like if you wanted to quickly program up something to monitor your house plants and water them for you, everything should be completely plug and play. You should be able to configure it completely from this interface. So I'm working on a couple other cat-shaped breakout boards for this and other cat-themed electronics that integrate into this ecosystem. Yes?
One final cat-like thing that occurred to me. I was walking around Portland yesterday, and I noticed they have these public parking spots on the streets which have a kitty code on them. And I was wondering, what the heck is a kitty code? That's something cat-like.
Oh, I have no idea. But I saw those too, and it has like the Wi-Fi emanating from its head like my logo. So I was like, what? I skipped over the last couple of slides, but I'll briefly run through these. These are kind of old. So in terms of some other stuff I want to explore with my projects, I want to work with some other chipsets. Nordic is very interesting. I didn't start working with their stuff until very recently, mostly because Zephyr is honestly kind of hard to work with. I'm still wrapping my mind around how that works. But they've got a lot of really interesting wireless capabilities. I've mostly worked with GSM band stuff like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but I'd also like to branch out a little bit more and explore some other wireless stacks. I also saw this really funky chip from Espressif, which I thought might be cool for trilateration. It's a dual antenna ESP32. It looks weird, but I mean, you know. Also, I want to give a shout out to my friend Joey. So his project really inspired me. If y'all don't know, maybe I'll let Joey do his pitch after this. But he creates some really cool stuff. I attended his talk last year and met him at Teardown 2023. And this inspired me to basically read data sheets for the first time. A lot of my projects are focused on like things that you can build with microcontrollers, but I didn't really think about like how much stuff is packed internally on these chips and just like how capable they really are. Like I went home, I read the fuck out of the Espressif data sheet. There's just so much cool stuff you can do that I really haven't touched yet. They have like a dedicated encryption core that you can use for like generating secure stuff and like all sorts of, I don't know. I had a friend that showed me a project recently that's ESP32 based. He created a reactive display for his bike, but what's cool about it is it doesn't use any CPU, like clock cycles. Like typically with the rigs that I program, you need to put firmware on them. The ESP32 steps through instructions, and it's like, oh, if this happens, do this or whatever. There's a dedicated part of the silicon on the ESP32 that does pulse counting, so you can just read pulses. So what he did was he marked dots on his tires, and he uses the pulse counter to use the tire as a rotary encoder. And then there's also something called DMA, direct memory access, that you can use sort of as like a silicon kind of like peripheral to drive things that also doesn't require CPU. I might have expressed that wrong. But he uses that to drive the lights. So basically everything is happening on dedicated silicon and doesn't require any CPU usage. And I was like, that's so freaking cool. I want to learn how to do stuff like this. But I really haven't like dived into that deep of like low level stuff. I don't know. Joey inspired me. And I really love his projects. Y'all should check out his talk. Let's see what else I have here. Oh, what's also fascinating is machine learning is also becoming accessible at a relatively low price point. If you guys have seen Edge Impulse, they make machine learning available for some of the chipsets that I mentioned. You can do inferencing, like all sorts of cool stuff. A cool project that I saw recently is called Wi-Fi DensePose. It essentially uses Wi-Fi signals, like 2 Wi-Fi radios. I think they used routers to do pose estimation through walls. Typically, you need a camera and like some other technology to do this, but I was wondering if it's possible to do this on a microcontroller. There's a bunch of really cool implications for this. When it comes to Wi-Fi security and some of the things that I do, there's problems like MAC address randomization, which gets in the way. Like with the tracking stuff that I talked about, if you want to see if someone's following you, or like determine if a unique device is in the area. Nowadays, that's a little bit harder because devices randomize their hardware address, and that's like changing. I've seen a couple research papers that use machine learning to determine basically the unique way that certain devices randomize their hardware addresses, like iPhones do it differently than a Windows computer or things like that. So I also, like a lot of the work that I do explores like how I can basically like mesh my wireless research with hardware and also make this more accessible. But I also want to find ways to mesh machine learning with some of the things that I'm building as well. Yeah, that's pretty much all the slides that I have. But do you guys have any other questions, or do you want me to dwell further on any of the projects that I built?
Do your other devices require you to get the device back in order? Are they just data logging, or are they also transmitting data to you so that you can, other than the Twilio?
Most of the devices are like set it and forget it. So like with the Wi-Fi throwies that I showed, the one that I built to surveil the Wi-Fi cameras at my girlfriend's apartment complex, I just literally threw that up somewhere, and then I came back and joined an access point that I set up on that device so I could pull information down from it. That was stored on the SD card. Because I also build these kinds of things for clients, not necessarily as like fault-tolerant like systems that are actually meant to be used for intensive stuff, but more as like a showcase, because they have to show like their client a proof of concept before they build like a full-fledged system. Where the hell was I going with that? I forgot. What was your question again? Oh yeah, it completely depends, but most of the times I try to set it up in like a fire and forget kind of way where I don't have to like physically go there to pull the information down. Because the idea is like if you want to build a botnet or like a swarm of these devices, I want to be able to just like throw these somewhere and kind of forget about them and have them be like a disposable thing. How are those ones transmitting to me? Most of them have Wi-Fi access points. Like the one I set up in my dad's law office and at home are just connected to local networks that I hacked. Yes, Joey.
I'm just curious with the DNS thing. So you're putting the GPS location into a piece of the subdomain. Is it like, are you getting this by running your own DNS server? Like, how are you actually resolving this?
So I don't need to resolve the DNS request. I just need to send out like a request to resolve that domain. So the GPS location also has like a comma in it and like all that stuff, right? So what I have to do first is base 32 encode that. So it's just alphanumeric. So it'll be like abc123.alexlynd.com. And then I send a request when I connect to Starbucks Wi-Fi. I say resolve abc123.mydomain.com. I don't actually need to get the IP address. I don't care about that. The fact that it goes through. Also, wait, yes, I misunderstood your question. I am logging DNS requests, so that's how that works. Yes. Yes. Correct. Let me see if I have something on this slide here. So what's actually cool is you don't need to set up your own DNS server. There's a free online service called Canary Tokens. You guys can watch my video at dnsdriveby.com if you want to learn about this. Canary Tokens is a service that is designed to make it really easy for you to set up honeypots. So you can make a Microsoft Word document or a PDF file, and you can put it on your computer just by going to this website. It's literally 2 steps. If someone opens up this file, it'll send you an alert via email telling you that someone has accessed this thing that you're not supposed to have access to. One of the services that they offer is a DNS token. So every time that subdomain is hit, it's basically a subdomain of Canary tokens that they provide. You'll get a result on this dashboard. This is the Canary Tokens website. And you can see that the data that I exfiltrated to this dashboard using their free service, it's a GPS request. They automatically do the decoding, so I sent it out as a base 32 encoded location. It has the time, it has the location. So if you don't have the capacity to set up your own server, this is a really frictionless way to do that. Yeah. Yeah. I literally use ChatGPT for that. So, cool. Do you guys have any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming to my talk. You can find me around, and I'd love to hear about some of the stuff that you guys are working on. Thank you.